Hey everyone, D-Dub Squizzy here. Welcome back to Civ 3 World War II. I just noticed that Stug there. You move. Okay. Yeah, that should be a good spot. I don't think it can escape us now, no matter where it goes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... Okay, well if it goes that way exactly, then it will get out of our range, but... You know, what are the odds that it does that? I'm tired of that stupid King George V just existing down there, being super annoying. Okay, we pretty much overcame the flak problem. Put them in there. More of these guys down a Mao. It's still annoying having to move each thing manually, but boy is it so much more convenient when you move them all at once. Yeah, there was nothing new here. Alright. This, I'm gonna put it out here. Hindenburg's still healing up. Yeah. One more turn and it'll be good. Also, I was checking a carrier last time. Yeah, we do have a new one. That's what I thought. Also, who has the new 88 up there? I didn't even think about that until literally just now when I noticed there was an unmoved 88. You. Is this new? Bergen must have just gotten finished up. We'll go to Gibraltar, because I know you can get that far. Oh, New Hindenburg here. Cool. Ponta Delgada, go. Need to entirely establish ourselves as the dominant sea power out here. Those Iowas are the last challenge to my authority. Of all the states to feel threatened by, I never thought Iowa would be at the top of the list. Alright. Are they on their way out? Yes. So we want to leave that stack alone. Definitely try to kill that. And this. Maybe them too. I don't know if I have enough... well, I know that I don't have enough 87Bs for all of them. We're going to try to take out all 4 stacks, though. This one is going first. Actually, no. Target that one first. I know that my 88s up in Georgetown can hit the upper stacks. I'm not so sure about these lower ones. They're sort of making one last crazy charge towards us. And of that I approve. The sad part is, this is just like the weakest link of the American military. Like, all the stuff we've been fighting down here, as annoying as it's been, it hasn't really been that dangerous, but it has been annoying, is literally the weakest of their units that they'd throw at us. Like, they've got cavalry, but everything else has higher defense, or is faster, or will actually attack us, or has anti-aircraft capabilities. Like, what we've been fighting down here is the weakest tip of the iceberg. And it's taken us this much effort just to break it. It's going to be bad once all their tanks show up, because it's just going to be one massive wave of just all of them. Now, a lot of them aren't that threatening, because they won't actually attack us, at least not our higher level units. They'll hit us with things like M2A2s, and M2A2s are helpless. Their Wolverines are pretty much entirely defensive. The Lee Grants are decent tanks, I think, but I'm pretty sure their numbers are too low for them to actually attack our Panzers, or Stugs, or Panzer Grenadiers. So for the most part, we should be alright, but they're going to get in the way, they're going to be fast, and they're tougher than most of these infantry are. But at least we won't be fighting in nothing but jungle. You know, once we get out to the open lands, we'll have much easier of a time, I guess. A much easier time? I feel like I'm saying it wrong. We'll have an easier time once we actually get out of South America. Plus, I'll be able to capitalize on injured units with my tanks. We won't have to just keep letting them run around. Speaking of, I gotta remember to send my tanks down here this turn and stop leaving them behind. I'm gonna need more of them for once we actually hit Central America. I got a decent number down here. Not nearly enough, though. I was listening to someone who's interested in going to the Congo, talking about the Congo itself. Well, sorry, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which it's definitely Democratic Republic. Currently, apparently, it's kind of just got a constant couple of civil war type situations going on. So it's basically, even though it's one country according to, you know, geography, in reality it's not. There's one central government, a president who's been in charge for like 50 years, and there are constant rebellions trying to overthrow him. And this is all in the west, where the capital is, whose name I cannot remember. I feel like maybe it's not even one of these cities or something, but their capital is in the west, and that's where most of the fighting is, most of the rebellion and stuff is focused in. And so that's always just constantly going on. They never seem to really overthrow him, but they keep trying. And it's really destructive type rebellion stuff. So that's a thing that's going on there. Yeah, you guys wait. And then other than that, there's no roads, I heard, throughout the actual Congo itself, which was really the reason I was telling this story, or am reciting what I had heard, because it's kind of funny. That one of the like 3 most notable things about the country is the same thing that you notice in this game the moment you get there, which is just, there are no roads. It's impossible to move around here. And it's true, there aren't. It's a massive country, one of the bigger ones in Africa, because Africa is very much cut up into smaller pieces. I think it's got the most numerous, it is, oh my word, I'm having trouble talking today. There are more countries in Africa than there are in any other continent in the world, I think. Europe might have them beat, and well, that might have been for a while ago too, but I'm pretty sure they have more countries than anywhere else. Part of that's because Africa is freaking huge, and it is. It's an enormous continent. But part of it's also just because they like to draw up their borders and divide each other, or divide themselves. So it's got all these divisions just in it naturally. But the DCR is enormous. Now, to the west, I talked about that. That's where their more civilized area is. That's constantly under fire from rebellions and stuff. To the east, it turns out, are like a bunch of militias, basically, that are, I guess, basically just warlords, would be the way to think about it, who just sort of run the place. And because there's no roads, the government, and the fact that they're always fighting in rebellions in the west, and that it's, you know, just a very corrupt country in general, the president, really dictator, who runs the place, just sort of said, I'm not helping with the militias, you're on your own. Meaning the entire eastern portion of the DCR is just under the control of these warlords, and your day-to-day life is just whichever one happens to own you at the moment. Which is really bad. I don't know, I don't have a main point in talking about it, but I had just heard about it, thought it was interesting. Like I said, it was mostly the road thing. I found it, you know, grim as it is to say, sort of amusing that one of the things they're most famous for is having no roads, even now. But it's really quite the rough place to live. I heard right next to it I can't remember what the name of the nation is, but just to the on the border of their eastern border is another nation, much smaller but much more industrialized. That's all about trying to get Western tourism in for the most part. That's like the president's main focus of that country, and it's a little tyrannical. It's got a lot of harsh rules. It's very difficult to get into it, but it's not nearly as dangerous. That's not saying it's not dangerous at all. It's still Africa, and it's hard to find a truly safe country in Africa, but it's not nearly as dangerous as the DCR, which is just a hellscape. I wonder if they'd actually do something different if there were roads. Like the president, you know, they can make up the excuse of, well, we can't get anyone down there because there's no roads, it's impossible to actually move that way, so you're just going to have to deal with it on your own. But I wonder if that's real or if that's just an excuse, because he's, you know, always fighting rebellions and stuff, and dictators usually, as long as it's not directly impacting them, unless they're just ideologically authoritarian, they usually don't care that much what people are doing otherwise. So I wonder if the guy would intervene if he were able, or if the no roads is not really part of the problem and it's just that he doesn't want to. It's a sad state of affairs. Because you know it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, Africa's got so much stuff. So many resources and incredible lands. People talk all the time about how the West, you know, showed up and just sort of took everything and made it theirs, and that they shouldn't have done that. Well, anyone who's listened to me for any length of time knows my views on how people always think of colonialism, or at least probably should. Basically, it's the same views that I have for everything else in the world. Some bad, some good. It's really quite simple. Colonialism itself, while the argument behind it is a difficult one to make, and what I mean by that is, it is conquest, right? You show up, you take a thing, you say, this is ours now, and you're going to do what we say. It is hard to make a logical argument, as someone who cares deeply about freedom, and I do, for why that's an okay thing to do. But the best one, really the main one, is that when your government has no interest in advancing anyone or anything at all, and I mean literally actually advancing, like growing, you know, building more roads, advancing technologies, increasing access to food, making a greater market share, and then giving those benefits to the people, then you're asking to get conquered, is really what's happening there. And colonialism is probably the best method by which a country can be conquered, where the one who conquered it doesn't show up, rape the land, and leave. They show up and start working it. They make the people who are there part of themselves, a lot like how Rome did. I mean, that's really what Rome was, by most standards. Rome kind of operated a lot like colonialism back in the day, except they were all connected, you know, literally and physically, because they didn't have planes and massive ships. Their navy was never that remarkable, although it was effective when it needed to be. But it was the same idea. They'd show up to a place, they'd say, you're us now. If the place resisted, they'd beat the snot out of them, and then seize control by force. And then, after they seized control, they were like, okay, you're Roman now. We're gonna make sure that you have roads and aqueducts and walls, that you're safe, that there's order and law, that there's, you know, things that are enforced and protected. All that you have to do is pay your taxes and don't revolt. And as long as you don't do those things, we won't have a problem. And that ended up making the areas that they went to much better. Now, I personally, if I were, you know, actually in control of a nation, would never actually do that. Because it takes a hefty degree of narcissism to think to yourself, I'm the answer to that nation's problems, me personally. And so I'm going to go in by force and make them see how helpful I am. That's just, you know, it reeks of deep pride. Because it is. It's a lot like being a president nowadays. I'm a Trump supporter. Anyone who listens to me for any length of time probably has figured that out. But There is no doubting the fact, no disputing, that he is one of the most proud and obnoxious people on the planet. And he is that mostly because he genuinely thinks he is that good. Now, he doesn't think he's perfect. That's pretty clear if you actually hear him talk. But he thinks that he's the one who's fit to run things, the one who deserves to be in command, as does every president, right? I mean, to run for president, you must think to yourself, I am better than every other candidate. Otherwise, why would you run? Either that, or I want money and power. Those are really the two options, and the other one's worse, in my opinion. But they think to themselves, everyone would be better off with me in charge, so I'm going to try to be in charge. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But that is the thought process. You know, Trump embodies that as much as anyone else. Biden thought the same thing, to the extent he was thinking at all. Obama thought it before him, and Bush, and Clinton, and, you know, so on and so forth, all the way back until time immemorial. There are a couple people who take control out of necessity. I think there's a distinct possibility George Washington was one of those, although I really don't know. I'm a big fan of George Washington, but I'd be lying if I said I was a deep scholar on him. I don't know as much as I probably should. Particularly about much of his lifestyle. I know that he was a man of great discipline and high standards. He wrote, one of his most famous actual works that a lot of people don't even know about anymore. He wrote an actual book on, like, manners and etiquette that just has a bunch of, basically, rules for how you should act when you're around people in public and stuff. He just, I don't know. He could have been that proud. But from what I understand of how he ran pretty much everything that he ever did, he just doesn't strike me the same way as a lot of the people do now. Of course, I'm also a little biased. I'm an American. If you're an American and you don't love George Washington, then you're a stupid American or an evil one. It's hard not to like him personally, no matter who you are. Like, I didn't directly benefit much, me or America, from Winston Churchill's command over Britain. I mean, technically, of course, he fought Germany, and he had a very active hand in the war. He's a major part of why Britain remained in it, kept fighting, that they were successful in the things that they did. Not the only reason by any stretch, but he is a major part of it. So it's true that that I have reason to actually like him for those reasons and stuff. But he was just a really cool dude. Like, the kind of stuff that went on in his life, the history that he had, the exploits that he got up to when he was younger. I mean, he was a lancer. An actual on-horseback lancing people. Like, down in South Africa, I think. Way back when. That was the main part of his background. He got captured, I think, 3 or 4 different times. And he kept escaping the places that would capture him. And then go back out on dangerous scouting missions when he was ordered to. And he just kept on doing his work. He was a fascinating person. There was a famous autobiographer who used to just write autobiographies of famous people. And he had done some on very prominent figures. I think his biggest one was on Napoleon, but I'm not sure. And at one point, he decided he was going to make one on Winston Churchill. And he got several volumes in of writing before just quitting, being completely done with it. He was asked why at one point, and his reason for why he stopped was there is simply too much. It cannot all be written down. Which really kind of tells you something. I don't know, Winston Churchill, a lot of people don't like him nowadays. One of just, probably in the contending, in the running for, like, top 2 or 3 best prime ministers that Britain's ever had. And it's some steep competition. Britain's had some very good prime ministers. Not that many, but they've had a few. You're gonna wait. But he was a cool guy. Anyway, back on the main topic I was talking about. Colonialism. by and large, places that got colonized, and I say by and large mostly because Britain was the by and large, were better off. France and Spain and Germany, I believe, and probably Italy. I can't remember on that. I think Italy was pretty bad, but France, Spain, and Germany for the most part. I could be wrong about Germany too. France and Spain were pretty okay. If you were colonized by them, usually they mostly kept the status quo. They'd take what they wanted, and they'd kind of move on. And they'd maintain some order and stuff. Brazil, not Brazil, Brazil's colonizers, the Portuguese, were the worst. If you got colonized by them, you'd be better off under one of your own local warlords, because at least he's going to treat you like a human. Maybe. The Brazilians were, I keep saying that, the Portuguese were bad. About as bad can ever be. The worst colonizers that we have like any record of. It makes complete sense to me why the Congo is the way it is after decades, if not centuries, I think it was actually centuries, of, oh no, that was Belgium. Belgium's also as bad as Portugal. Portugal is that bad, or was that bad, but Belgium was as bad or worse. It makes sense to me why the Congo is the way it is after that sort of an occupation. And so again, not all colonialism is good, not all colonizers are good, or have best interest of the people that they colonize in mind at all. I would say at heart, but that's never the case. Britain did not colonize people really because they had their best interests at heart. They weren't there to make your life better, really. They would because they understood the fact that if you mistreat the people that you conquer, they're going to resist you. And that was not going to be helpful for their program at all, so they couldn't have that. Wow, it really did take like all of our 88s to get those guys down, but we did it. So Britain, for the most part, was a very good colonizer, because they'd show up and they'd do what the Romans did. They'd put in schools, they'd put in roads, they'd put in a democratic system of government, at least for the local level stuff. They would absolutely enforce some sort of morality on people, and by that I mean when they got to India and saw women being burned at the stake, they stopped it from happening anymore. People complain often about India under Britain because of either just some bad apples or some wrong arguments, and by that I mean they will say like, this thing was bad when it wasn't. Just, you know, an argument that actually doesn't make sense. Because believe it or not, there are some of those. Hey, there's one of those tanks. You guys are gonna wait. But the fact remains, and it's basically indisputable, India is far better off because Britain controlled them. Because Britain was the one in charge. They made the nation a much better place. And when they left, it started rapidly going further downhill than it already was. Like, India has produced some cool things just on their own. Number Zero probably is one of the most notable examples. And I believe the compass. Although I can't remember on that one exactly. I know that some Arab nations take credit for those things now, but that's just because they sacked the Great Library at Alexandria and, you know, stole the things, but not actually because they invented them. India, they have some had at least, maybe still do, I don't know. It's very talented people in there. But the culture opposes progress because it's pagan. Pagan cultures oppose progress. It's why the Middle Ages were so bad, is because the Catholics were in control. The Middle Ages for Europe were so bad, at least. It's because the Catholics were in control, and they didn't like when people were actually expanding and doing stuff. A culture that is pagan but doesn't care that much about it, which exists, they're still not good, but they're not as bad. But the ones who it's what their whole everything is about, they end up being real bad, and India is one of the most prime examples of it. And again, it's a shame, because India, just like Africa, they've got a ton of space, an enormous amount of very helpful resources, and nice stuff. Like, there's a lot of things that go into them that make them, that give them a lot of potential. Oh, stupid special fortress. But it's all sort of thrown to the side, because because of the bad culture. And when Britain wasn't there to regulate them, they didn't have much of an interest in actually becoming British, which is really what Britain wanted from its colonies. It wanted them to adopt the British way of life and way of thinking and become British. Again, not because they had those people's best interests at heart. They had their best interests in mind. They worked towards those. But their best interests were always to England. To a more powerful monarchy. That's what they've always been about. And I'm no monarchy lover, I'll tell you that. I liked the results of some of British colonialism. But I've got no patience for the crown. Or for the people who are obsessed with it. I still don't get why anyone follows anything the British royalty does. I don't know, all this to say, in my opinion, colonialism is not always bad. And oftentimes for the people that get colonized, or sometimes at least, their lives got a lot better. Oh, that's in range. At least when they were colonized by the right peoples. If you got colonized by Portugal or Belgium, that kind of sucks. I can't remember if I heard of Germany being as bad too, or not. Germany had a bunch of colonies in various places around the world prior to World War I's conclusion. And then after World War I, they lost them all. Mostly because the Allies took them. And that's why all of Africa is Allied powers at the start of World War II. It's because they took it from Germany. Just the entire continent. They should have taken it from Italy too, but Italy was one of the Allies at the time. Which I believe is how they got some of their colonies. I can't remember on that one exactly. Let's check Dutch Harbor, because I did not already. The thing that really makes it clear is that that Britain's pretty good to be colonized by too. At least one of the glaring ones that I see is that they actually stepped back. They didn't do it, you know, immediately and super voluntarily. It's not like they were happy to just say, "Oh, you want your independence? We're off." There was some disputing, we'll say, but for the most part, I mean, they did leave, right? They're not still fighting for control in India or something, or countries along Africa. They still own a few of their... Wow, that's enough to get one whole hill done immediately. Neat. They still control a few nations. I think I've talked about it actually during this series, or maybe during the British series, but they still own Malta. They fight with, I think it's Venezuela, or argue, really, about who owns those islands off the coast of Venezuela or something like that. I don't even remember which islands they are, but, like, they still have some influence in a couple places, but absolutely nothing like they had. They gave it up. And it was mostly because the people who they had control over wanted their independence. And in some places, you fought for it. If you ever watch Monty Python's Life of Brian, you'll see the, I can't remember what they call it. It's like the Judah Liberation Front or something like that. I can't remember exactly what they call it. But it's the collection of people who appear routinely throughout the entire movie who are talking about seceding from Rome, throwing off the shackles of their oppressors, all of that stuff. Okay, I'm probably going to send some of them back this turn. And they'll talk, you know, what have the Romans ever done for us? It's a pretty famous scene. And like, what did they ever give us? And someone's like, well, they gave us roads. Another person, yeah, they gave us schools too. Those aqueducts are nice. You can walk the streets at night. And they just run through this long list of basically first world benefits that Judea had because Rome was there, and Rome brought those benefits with them. And Rome did. Mostly just because, again, they maintained order. I like Israel as a nation, but literally the only reason for that is because also something that anyone who's watched me for any length of time knows, I'm a Christian. And they're God's people, so by extension, I have a fondness for them. But there is no denying the fact that there are fewer, more contentious, argumentative, and self-defeating groups of people on the planet as the Jews. Really, the Hebrews in general. I say the Jews. The Hebrews are a lot more than just Judah and Benjamin and some of Levi, which is what Israel is nowadays. They're not all of Israel. They're like 2.5/13ths of Israel. The rest are, they're somewhere. The reason we don't know where they are and that they're not part of Israel as it stands now. How many guys are here? Okay, so they can start in. In case anyone's not very well versed or interested in their history much. They were conquered by Assyria, the northern tribes of Israel were. And after that conquest, Assyria's way that they would handle people they conquered was after you were conquered, they'd divide you and split you into separate... They'd basically send you to go colonize another place in their empire somewhere. They'd displace you from the place that was your home, and by doing that, they'd kind of keep people from getting too many nationalistic ideas and then revolting again. They're one of the few... what do you call them? Empires, I guess? Yeah, nations throughout history that operated that way. One of the only ones. It's not a dumb thing to do, I'll say that, although it is kind of evil. Kinda. The Assyrians were one of the worst conquerors in history, but they did that, and they didn't keep records of where they sent people, like, at all. So, once they were done sending those people out, they, you know, vanished to the four winds, and were never seen again. So now, who knows? I mean, like I said, it was a couple 13ths of all of Israel that was left, because after the civil war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam, Israel was split into two nations, with the southern half of it seceding and calling itself Judah. And that was all of Judah and Benjamin, and I think a little bit of Simeon and Levi, which were, for anyone who's not aware of Jewish history, those are 4 of the 13 tribes of Israel. Levi was just the priests, so they didn't take any land or really troops with them much. I say just the priests. It was not just the priests, but they didn't get any land promised to their families. They had a couple cities that were evenly spaced throughout the land, so that anyone could get to them, and they were very particular and special cities. Otherwise, they were the people who only they could be priests. That much is true, and the rest of them would, like, handle the business of the temples. If you were to walk into the temple in Judah, or Israel, in anywhere there, you would have to go through them, basically, to do anything. And so they didn't have any real land, per se. They had a little bit, but not much, and they didn't work it like the rest of Israel did. They were all the religious institutions and operators and stuff. So that was what they did. And so most of them, because they were centered, like, you know, mostly around Jerusalem, where the temple was, and that was in Judah, most of them stayed with the south. And the main rebelling tribe... Well, I say the main... I don't remember actually which tribe Jeroboam was from. But the one they were rebelling against was, of course, the kings. They were rebelling against the line of David, which is Solomon. He was the king, and then his son Rehoboam took over. He was of the line of David, because he was a king. Wow, man, New Caledonia just got bodied. And so that's who they were rebelling against. So, like 9.5 or 10 of the tribes seceded and left Judah behind, because that's the line of the kings, pretty much alone. That's why they called it Judah. Benjamin was still there. I think almost all of Benjamin, if not the entire tribe, was also there. They stuck with them. Most of the Levites were there because it was Jerusalem that the capital of Judah was. And then some of Simeon, because they were on the border, and they stuck with them too. But most of Simeon, I think, also left, although I can't remember on that one exactly. And so after that split, you had these two massive parts, and Judah had some kings that were actually good, including the one that they rebelled against. He was an idiot at first, but after he was an idiot, he got better later on in his life. He did cause them to split. That was entirely his fault, and it would have been easily avoidable. Literally, the only thing that happened, Jeroboam the rebel, the one who led the rebellion, after Rehoboam took over, he went to him and said, your dad, Solomon, had us doing like all kinds of heavy work, and it was difficult and exhausting. We don't want to do it anymore, so say you'll treat us lightly and fairly, and we'll serve you. We'll acknowledge you as our king. It was a reasonably fair offer. However, Rehoboam was not the smartest man. And what do we have here? Okay, next shipment we'll have the others come by to get them. He went to the old counselors of Solomon and said, what do you think I should do? Should I do what they want? The counselors said, yeah, absolutely. They had a hard time under Solomon. Oh my word, that is so many tanks. They had a hard time under Solomon. Their requests aren't that unreasonable, and you can't control them all. And so, do what they want, acquiesce to their requests, and they'll be servants of yours forever. Right? It was wise counsel. Rehoboam listened to that, and then he went to his friends, who he grew up with, and who he had then made his advisors after he was king. And they told him, well, don't do what these people want. They're rabble. They're the commoners. They don't get to do that. Say that you're going to be even harder on them, and then that'll teach them. It's almost out of a movie or something. But he did that. That was Rehoboam's solution. Was, yes, I'll just ignore the request, well, really the demands of the people, and instead threaten them. And he did that. And then Jeroboam led a rebellion and got them all turned on him. So he caused it all to begin with, because he was a moron. It was entirely his fault, and entirely avoidable. After that happened, and the rebellion occurred, and they seceded, he actually got together with his army, and he was going to go try to take them back. And the word of the Lord came to him and said, I think via one of the prophets who was at the time, but I can't remember who, and told him, don't you dare try to take them back. You lost them. You're not getting them back. Just be okay with that. And to his credit, he did. And then he did not engage in a war with Judah over their rebellion. He just left, acknowledged that it was his fault, and moved on. And from that point on, I think he then had a couple of actually just good and prosperous years and events that happened in his life. So, not the worst king they ever had. An idiot at the start, cost them a massive chunk of what they had. But he kind of learned. He knew better by the end. We're going to take all of our panzers. Yeah. And we're going to try to just slaughter this stack the old-fashioned way. But after him, it was a real mixed bag. Every king that they had, some were good, some were bad, some were very, very bad. A lot of them were all over the place. But they had some good ones, including some very good ones. They had a couple that were exceptionally good. As well as probably the worst king in all of human history, at least by my estimation. It's possible there are some pretty bad rulers throughout history, but King Manasseh of Judah, he was something else on the level of demented and evil. But Israel, after the split, did I just die? I think I just lost that guy. Had only one king that I would consider in any way good. And that would be Jehu. I think the son of Nimshi? Well, I can't remember. I don't know if he was ever, if he ever repented and was saved or not, but I do know that he at least respected God and God's people, and by that I mean his prophets and the priests and stuff, and that respect kept him from doing things that were too stupid. And so he followed the orders he was given. He slaughtered the line of Ahab, Ahab's son, who took over after King Ahab died. And anyone who doesn't know Ahab, that's not a surprise, because Ahab was useless and an idiot. But his wife, Jezebel, is very well known, and probably everyone knows who she was. Well, his son took over after he died, and Jehu was the one who killed him, wiped out his line, and then found Jezebel and killed her too, and then extinguished Baal worship, which was Jezebel's religion, from Israel. That was Jehu who did that. He was a pretty good king. Rough guy, but he was a warrior. He was the one that God told to be king, and then he told him to do those things, to wipe out Baal worship and to punish Ahab's line for what he had done. And Jehu did them. So he was a pretty good king. But it's hard to know, really, because he did some dumb things later, too. But he's the closest thing they had. Other than him, the Northern Kingdom was just one problem after another. They were bad. Their kings, every one of them pretty much, was just awful. And awful in the worst ways, too. Like, some of them weren't that bad. That's the best you could say about them. Like, maybe some of them didn't put their babies on the hands of Moloch. Which, for anyone who doesn't know, the worship of the evil god Moloch involved putting your children into the hands of a giant brass bull-headed man thing that was his idol, and then letting them cook alive as you lit a fire underneath them. That was how you worshipped Moloch, and that was what many of the kings of Israel did. It was one of the things that God was most angry with them about. Just truly awful stuff. Some of the kings of Israel didn't do that. That's like the best I can say about them. I can't even imagine what would have to go through your head to cause you to do that. Let's wipe out their infantry. They still have infantry in there? I thought I'd at least get to the Marines or something. How many are in there? Okay, 4 infantry, 4 Marines, 2 fortresses, and an artillery. I think we've got enough to take them out next turn, hopefully. And once we do, I'll leave a couple guys here to defend, probably. Anyone else can load up, and then we'll head down here. Right, the whole reason I even got into that history to begin with, which I had entirely kind of forgotten about until now. Or, yeah, forgotten's the right word. The reason that all of that happened is because, or the reason I went into all of that was to talk about why they were scattered to the winds, why we had no idea where the actual descendants of Israel are anymore. And it's because Assyria was sent to conquer them for those horrible things that they did. The southern kingdom got invaded by Assyria. They got torn up a bit. But they were not destroyed. They were pushed down to just a couple of major cities, a couple strongholds, Jerusalem being one, because Jerusalem is one of the most famous and powerful stronghold cities on the planet. They had another one called Lachish. That one was held for a while against Assyria, but eventually it fell too. But they did. They held out for quite some time. And then the angel of the Lord came and killed 186,000 Assyrians in one day, and their army retreated. But before that happened, they conquered all of Judah, all the land at least, killed and captured a lot of people, destroyed a lot of stuff, and they wiped out the entirety, pretty much, of Israel. They conquered the whole thing, took everyone, and left. And then they scattered them all over their empire, which was very widespread at the time. They didn't survive much longer, but they also didn't keep records, so no one knows where those guys went. When Judah fell, they were conquered by Babylon, and Babylon did keep track of where they sent their people, so they knew. Well, really. Whoa. But really, they didn't just have to keep track of them. They kept them in Babylon, is what they did. Okay, I should probably bomb those flak. I don't want to, but I need to keep them from leaving, from joining up with the other groups. America's kind of going all over the place. I'm going to have to focus a lot of fire on the stack that has the 1 flak in it. I'd hoped they'd move closer, but they're falling back, which I did not expect. It works for me, though. My workers are going to pour in next time. Oh, you went in the dumbest direction possible. You're dead. I wonder if they're actually going to do anything about that guy. They're just going to let him hang on to that road. Well, that history also kind of illustrates my initial point, too, which was the The Jews are a very, very fractious crowd. You can just see they're constantly fighting with each other, with their neighbors. They're getting in all sorts of trouble just all the time. Lots of idol worship. Just perpetual trouble for one reason or another. But extremely talented people. Come up with all sorts of incredible inventions. Do you know they have a melon that survives on salt water and it produces fresh water, like inside of it? That's nuts. There are plenty of things to like about Israel as a people. And that is true. That is true for people all over the world, too. There are things to like. But Israel has a lot to like, while also having a lot to sort of shake your head at for the trouble that they cause too. They're a mixed bag as far as this world's consideration goes. Me personally, as I said, they're God's people. So I have a permanent place of affection in my heart for them, just like I would a family member of mine, right? No matter how stupid that family member gets, I still care about them. And it's sort of the same thing. But man, yeah, their history, even now, they don't really like people like me, for the most part. At least the sort of fundamentalist Jews, the Hasidics and stuff. They see a Gentile like me pretty much declaring that I have a relationship with Jehovah. They take that very personally, and they get very offended by it. Which, if you're in rebellion, I can get why. To them, they mostly teach that the Lord Jesus Christ was the arch deceiver who is responsible for deceiving all the nations and a bunch of their own people, and then getting them wiped out because Rome showed up after him and the disciples and destroyed Jerusalem, razed it to the ground, and scattered Judah a little bit more. We still know where pretty much all of them are because they kept track of themselves, but they weren't as organized again until like the 1900s. And quite a few of them probably we did lose their lineages. But they blame the Lord for that kind of thing, and the fact that I would not only claim a relationship with Jehovah, me, a Gentile, one of the people that hurts them, but that I would claim it through who they call the arch deceiver, it is very offensive to some of them. The ones who are serious about Judaism. Which, again, is incorrect, but I get it. I get why they feel that way. I mean, I'd probably be kind of angry at everything, too, if it felt like the entire world constantly wanted to kill me for basically no reason. Some people might find that ridiculous that I say there's no reason. But in truth, there isn't. People can argue all they want about... Oh wow, this thing's actually completely filled up. Cool, we're just going to have you make some wealth for us. About the activities of Israel's government. I'm going to take you, actually, have you come deal with that, because someone needs to, and I've been putting it off. We had a couple other, too, somewhere. The problem is, most people's critiques of any sort of Israeli government type stuff almost always devolves into attacking the Jews as a people. Which is just purely wrong. I'm just going to say it. Not just because it's wrong to blame people for what just others like them do or their stuff like that, but also the things they get blamed for are basically always incorrect. People talk now about Israel committing a genocide against their neighbors. Yeah, they're not. If they were committing a genocide, it'd be a lot more prominent, a lot more obvious, and a lot more destructive. They're actually going out of their way to not harm civilians, but they're in a war, so civilians get hurt. Really, you can blame the people that hide behind civilians. You can blame them for the collateral damage, but the people who claim that America, the Americans especially, claim that America should not be funding any of their stuff or giving them any money, I disagree, but I disagree for personal reasons. Like I said, I care about Israel, so I want them to be successful. So I can totally get the argument, and I wouldn't argue it heavily. I'm completely fine with us continuing to send support to Israel, but that's mostly for personal reasons. So someone not buying those, I get it. It's pretty much impossible to argue with. Oh, cool, so my bombers here can take out both that stack and this one. They'll still be able to survive, but we can get them before they run away too. So that we'll knock them down to just one actual stack of infantry. And then the following turn we can take that and hopefully destroy those flak. Clearing them off completely. We'll get that road established, although that doesn't do us a ton of good. Because they're just surrounded by jungles here. My word. I might just wait until I can get an airport or something up here. I don't know, I'm trying to figure out what the best way to approach this is, but without that one road... Maybe I just go in and take it. I take Manau, maybe. I get these guys to finish their road, like, over here or something like that. And then I wait for the workers to get up here so we can very quickly throw down a road on one of these spots. And then I can jump over and take that. Once I have that, I should be able to grab that probably in 2 turns. I'm assuming they'll retain the hill, so we'll have to get on that, then take them. And then we'll grab that one almost immediately after. And then it's a simple, you know, hop, skip, and away down to Colombia. And once we own them, I won't try to advance up to Panama until we've completely neutralized Chile and Brazil as well. But we're going to have to take this and get this road here built before I actually make any moves on Venezuela. Because I want my workers up there. Alright. Well, I think that's going to be it for this one. If you have not yet, please check the link in the description for my book, and if you like the look of it, give it a read. If you like the read, give it a positive review. Otherwise, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.